Hello, and thank you for accessing our mini session, Top 5 Intelligence Reports in 15 Minutes. This training is part of our Timely Topics Education series, which includes education and resources designed to speak to the current business climate. I'm your host, Naomi, and I'll be going over a few quick items before we get started. Everything you see on your screen is movable and resizable using the arrows in the corners. At the bottom of your screen are multiple widgets to support today's session, and I'll highlight a few now. If you have any questions about today's content, you can submit them through the Q&A widget, and we'll be sure to get back to you via email. We also have additional resources to support today's topic in the Resources widget that looks like a folder, so be sure to check that out. And finally, to help guide us on future topics, we ask that you complete a quick survey at the close of the session. You can find it in the widget that looks like a clipboard. Now that that's out of the way, I'd like to hand it off to our speaker for today's mini session, Elizabeth Bridges.
Thank you, Naomi. Hello, my name's Elizabeth Bridges, and we're going to talk today about the top 5 intelligence reports in 15 minutes. So as our climate has changed over the past few months, we really wanted to provide you with reports that were easily accessible within reporting to make your job easier. Many of us are working remotely now and don't have the opportunity to ask a question to a colleague or someone in the next office over or beside you. So we wanted to talk about 5 reports today that will be helpful to you and your organization as it applies to today's environment. So today, we're going to talk about the top 5 intelligence reports include the Workflow Cycle Times by Processor report, the Persona Dashboard. We're also going to talk about the Unassigned Credit Card Transactions, the Top Exception Violators report, and then lastly, the Duplicate Expense Items report. Now, the first report that we're going to talk about today is the Workflow Cycle Times report by Processor. Now, this report is located in the public folders under Standard Reports in the Expense Processing folder. Now, the Workflow Cycle Times by Processor report provides you the time it took a report to go through those major workflow steps. And it's also going to give you information about the processor name, and it gives you an additional clickable drill through with an additional report to provide you with more detail. So even though that you may not be in the office, you would have the visibility on what the processor or the manager is actively reviewing and processing. You can see how long those processors are approving given the time and the change in the environment that we're in. You will have that visibility by running this report. Now, I wanted to talk about the detail of the Workflow Cycle Times by Processor report. The first page of this report, if we look here, you're going to see that I ran this report from the sent for payment date range from January of 2017 to 2020. This is a very large date range, but it gives us a lot of data and a lot of information. And what it's telling us here is you're going to see information first about the processor. And if you go to the right, you'll see the report count given for that date range that was run. Next, you're going to see the approved amount for all those reports that they had processed. You're also going to see the number of entries, the number of exceptions, and then the average days it took to process that report. Now, when we look at this information, it gives us a nice glimpse, but as we go down a little bit further below, we may see it's going to give us information that we may want to investigate a little bit further. For example, for admin Karen, that's midway down on the page, you'll see that it has an exceptionally high number of exceptions, so it may warrant some more research just to look and see why that's occurring. So if we click on the processor in the blue hyperlink, you're going to see below that it's going to give you a lot more detail. And when we open up that portion of the report, you're going to see that it's going to give us the processor name. And then if we look to the right, you're going to see it's going to give us the employee ID, and then the report name and the report ID. If we go a little bit further to the right, we're going to see when that report was created, the submitted date, when it was sent for payment, and then we're also going to see the approved amount, the number of entries within that report, the number of exceptions, and then we'll see the submission days, which means that's the time that it took for the report to be created to the time it was submitted, as well as how long it took to approve, the approval days. Now, if we go a little bit further to the right, we're also going to see that information for the approvals as well. So again, this gives us a lot of information, a great amount of information as we review the major workflow steps within this report. So again, this is a wonderful report to use just to utilize and review the cycle times it took for the processor to review and process those reports. Now, the next report that I wanted to provide to you today is the Persona Dashboard report. And the Persona Dashboard provides you with all the relevant data you need to manage your business in one location. This is a dashboard that gives visual indicators identifying if there's an existence with potential problems, or just gives you a nice snapshot and overview of the spend and a lot of information at a very high level. The Persona Dashboard gives us a story about that data, and it gives you education on how those metrics are also calculated. And so it just gives you a nice broad overview if you want to research further if there's any changes that need to go into effect. Now let's look at a little bit more about this dashboard. Now this is going to be the output for the Persona Dashboard. This is the Department Manager Spend Overview. Now, if we look over here to the right, it gives us a lot of information about spend. It's going to give us information about that overall spend, what's been spent, and how many days are left, and if you have a budget that's included. It also gives you a spend overview where you do have the opportunity to include your budget information if you would like, so you'll see your spend against your budget. Now, as we go over here to the right, I wanted to give you a little bit more information about these visual indicators that I mentioned. The visual indicators, you'll see right to the right where it says future trips, there's a little I. That is going to give you information on how these numbers or how that data is calculated. So it gives you the information if you're curious to see where that number came from. Then if you go over here to the right, you'll see a page with a drop down, and I have an example here. The first report, which is the future trip details, is related to that information, but it's going to give you detail on how that information or that report was built. So basically the goal of it is to provide the detail behind that number. If you go further down on the drop down, it will give you the information on the standard report. So basically it's linking that information to the standard reports that's related to that information. So again, this dashboard provides a nice high-level overview of the information, but you can drill through on additional detail as needed. Now, lastly, if we look at the bottom, we'll see the top 10 spending employees. So it's going to give you those top 10 spending employees. And again, if you'd like additional information on how this number is calculated, you can select the little I button. Or if you want additional detail, you can use the drop down on the page and you'll be able to run that report to get that additional detail. So again, this is a wonderful dashboard to review, and you can utilize this for a lot of different information as needed. We do have a number of dashboards available, but wanted to highlight this one. Now next, we would like to talk about the Unassigned Credit Card Transactions Report. Now this report is located in the standard reports in the accrual folder. And if you go to the very bottom, you'll see where this report is located. Now this report lists all of the unassigned credit card transactions. And the purpose of this report is to encourage that submission of expense reports in a very timely manner. So the report accounts for all those expenses that have been sitting out there. So it really wants you to help give you a snapshot of how you can manage your cash flow successfully. Now, once you run this report, it will give you a lot of information about how and when and to talk to your employees about submitting those expense reports in a timely manner, and also just encouraging if you have a certain policy of when those expense reports need to be submitted. Now, if we look at a little bit more detail into this report, this is going to show you the employee name. It'll give you that employee ID, and it's going to give you that payment type, the name of the card, and it's also going to give you the transaction type and then the merchant and that merchant code. It'll also give you the transaction date and the download date, and then it gives you that posted amount. So again, this report is an excellent way to educate your employees that aren't submitting those expense reports in a timely manner, and they just may not be aware about the policy that you have in place. So you can reach out to your employees and educate them on encouraging those submissions of those reports and what the next steps should be. Now, the next report that we'd like to talk about is the top Exception Violators report. And this report is located in the Standard Reports under the Compliance folder. Now, it's the third report down, and what this report does is gives you those top 10 employees with the highest number of exceptions or report header exceptions. When we look at this report, it's going to give us a list by ranking of who the employee is, their employee ID, the number of exceptions, and then that total expense amount. So again, this is an excellent training opportunity for employees that they may have exceptions that are flagged that's holding up the process of that expense report. So again, our goal in the organization is to lower those exception counts so that those expense reports can be processed efficiently. Now, you also do have the opportunity to select the link, and it will include additional detail related to those expense reports. So again, this is a great report to run on a regular basis just to review and encourage addressing any of those high count of exceptions. Now, the last report that I wanted to talk about today was the Duplicate Expense Items report. And this report is located in the Standard Reports in the Fraud folder. And we'll see here it's located at the very top, and we wanted to focus on meals or the expense items. So it has versatility on how you want to identify this. Now, again, this report identifies those expenses that may have been submitted by the same employee more than once across multiple reports. So, for example, you may have a cell phone or an internet charge, and it may have been expensed as cash, but then it could also be expensed as a corporate card, and it could have been a mistake when they were expensing those items. And this could address or help be a good training opportunity for that employee. So it's a great report to review and see if there's any duplicates that are based on the same transaction date or the payment type. And again, this report is wonderful for auditors to review. Now, when we look at the detail of this report, it looks like there's a lot of information here, but if we look at the first line, it's going to give you some helpful cues. If we look, the duplicate expense items, here to the left, we're going to see the employee name. Then we'll also see the report name or the ID, and then we're going to see that it has the payment type and the transaction date and the expense amount. If we look over to the right, we may see a different report ID. However, it's always going to be the same employee, and you're going to see it has the same transaction date, and it's going to have the same amount, and it may be for perhaps a different vendor or a different payment type. But there are enough flags there to warrant some research to see if this is actually a duplicate expense. So again, this is a wonderful report to run and review, and it may be an opportunity to address with the employee or just to review for any type of fraudulent activity. Now, we have a large number of reports that can be utilized in intelligence. We have well over 200 reports. So I wanted to make sure that you had this document available in a link that gives you a lot of information on where these resources are located. So if you select this link, you're going to see some information here that's going to give you a lot of helpful information on report training. So if you would like some training guides on additional information for intelligence, the report catalog is available, and it gives you information on how to schedule reports and also how to create subfolders or folders that you can utilize. It'll also show you how to navigate through some of the reporting features, such as the preferences or changing the time zone. So I highly encourage you to review some of the training guides from intelligence. Now, if we look over here to the right, we also have these recorded training sessions. And this is going to be very helpful if you'd like to learn more about Query Studio or Report Studio. We have training sessions available that are 1 to 2 hours in length for the Part 1 and Part 2, where you'll be able to learn a little bit more about how to run and create reports in Report Studio or Query Studio. And then lastly below, if you see there is at the bottom portion, there's our pre-built standard reports catalog. Now this report catalog is going to be extremely helpful because we do have a large number of reports that are available. You'll be able to download this catalog, and you'll be able to search all of the reports that are available within this catalog by just doing a quick search. So again, you have the opportunity to review the catalog via the PDF file instead of running each report individually. So it's a great way to kind of search and navigate through those reports. I wanted to thank you so much today for joining us for the top 5 reports in 15 minutes, and hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. If you'd like to check out additional resources available on the Timely Topics Education page, please be sure to click through the link that can be found in the Resources widget. And as a final reminder, please be sure to complete the survey before you go. Thanks so much for joining us.